Hello, welcome back. So it is June, and that means that it is June on the Range, which is an event here on Booktube where we all celebrate Western novels and Western short stories, and you can even read some Western nonfiction if you like. It was created by Michael K. Vaughan a few years ago. It's a very popular event on Booktube. So the first book is Elmore Leonard's Escape from Five Shadows. This is a prison break novel set in, I believe, in Arizona, at a convict labor camp where they are being forced to build a road. And now when I talked about this book in my initial June on the Range video, I talked about how I have not had good luck with Elmore Leonard's Westerns and how I really haven't enjoyed them, and they have really bugged me and irritated me. And people were kind of questioning, well, why aren't you going to read another if you don't enjoy it? And what I forgot to mention about that is that I used to write fiction myself, and so sometimes I approach novels from a writer's perspective, from an editor's perspective. If there's something about them that I feel like I can learn something from, if there's something that gets under my skin about a certain writer's writing, their technique, their skill, the way they approach their stories, their sentence structure, and that sort of thing. And Elmore Leonard there is something about his writing that has always kind of irritated me, and it's gotten under my skin, and I really haven't been able to put my finger on exactly what it was. And so the reason that I was going to read another is because I wanted to look at it this time with a critical eye. I wanted to figure out what it was that bothered me about Elmore Leonard's writing. And I was sort of thwarted in this reading, because I actually really enjoyed this one, which has not been the case at all for the other ones. I enjoyed parts of the other novels I read, but mainly they disappointed me, whereas this I liked much more than the parts that disappointed me. And there were a couple of parts that disappointed me, and I'll talk about those. So this is a prison break novel set in Arizona, I think, at this convict labor camp. And it starts off in the very beginning. There's a young woman, I believe her name is Carla, and she lives with her father at a stagecoach stop, right? Like where the coaches stop, and so they have food and liquor and stuff like that. But there's really not that many people that come through here. So they're out in the middle of nowhere. They're 6 miles from this convict labor camp, and the convicts will come in with their guards and pick up supplies for this prison and take them back to the prison. And she just happened to see this one prisoner, and she was like smitten instantly. She just fell head over heels for this guy, and she feels like in her heart, oh, he's never done anything wrong. And I will admit to you that the moment that I read that, I sort of went, oh no, because I don't care for that sort of plot at all, right? I don't like that sort of love at first sight plot. It really frustrates me. But it really wasn't that bad in this book. It was beyond the point of being believable, I think. But it wasn't that bad. It was kind of a background thing for the most part. Anyway, the prisoner that she is in love with is named Bowen. And he was at the prison at Yuma, but he has been sent to this labor camp. And he wants to escape. That is his number one desire in life, is to escape from this prison and run off and get away forever. And he manages to do that in the very beginning of this book. He escapes, but he is picked up by these Apache guards. There are Apache guards who guard this whole camp, and they are being paid by the man who runs it. So he's captured and beaten up and thrown in the hole for several weeks. Now, at this camp, there is basically a warden. He's not really a warden. He's just some guy who has found this business opportunity of running this camp, and he is taking in all this money from the government to feed these prisoners and clothe them and house them, and he is spending like $1 a day on them, even though he's getting $15 each every day for them. Or is it? Yeah, I think so. It's something like that, $15 a day for each of them. and he is making not loads of money, but quite a bit of money. And there's an accountant who works there who is a drunk and a gambler, and he has a wife. And it turns out they were kind of wealthy people from back east, and he was supposed to be kind of like a star in the political world, but his demons held him back, and so they were sent out west basically to get rid of them. And his wife is very frustrated and very, very angry with him because he turned out to be a dud, even though, I mean, she only knew him for like a week or two before they got married. It's that real old-fashioned kind of thing. I think of it as like the Watson marriage, right? The John Watson marriage. Is it a study in Scarlet where Watson winds up married at the end, even though he's only talked to the woman in question 3 or 4 times or something like that? um, I just that whole Rush thing. So clearly, I mean, that got her into trouble. And she sees Bowen and she thinks, here is my escape ticket. I can use him and I can escape. So she starts scheming in her head. Meanwhile, Carla is writing letters to an attorney to try to get this Bowen guy out. Apparently, he's just irresistible. Bowen is still trying to figure out how to escape. He has friends and enemies in this labor camp that he sometimes trusts and sometimes he doesn't. Everybody's out for their own skin. Everybody has a scheme. Everybody's angling towards something. And they finally hit upon this scheme to escape using dynamite because they're dynamiting their way through this like kind of like a rock uh, canyon, like a rock canyon. And so Bowen used to work in the mines. He knows how to use dynamite. And so they plan this whole escape, right? And it goes from there. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that whole book, really. There were a few things that bothered me. The writing is pretty good, first of all. It's pretty entertaining. It's fast-paced. The dialogue is pretty good. What bothered me mainly was that, and this is what I finally figured out about Elmore Leonard. So if you've ever read, what is it? Is it Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power? One of the laws of power in that book is demonstrate, do not explicate. And so there is something about Elmore Leonard where he will have characters explain to you why they are bad guys. Or other characters will explain to you why the bad guy is the bad guy. Or they will explain to you how this whole scheme they have is working out. And sometimes they will take action and then explain to you why they did that action. Like, it's like nudging you, like, hey, man, did you see that? Did you see what I just did? Did you see how I did that? See how I'm strong and tough? And it's like, just demonstrate, right? Just show it through the actions of the characters. Show it through what they are doing. Show it through their attitudes. If the bad guy is a really bad guy, have him shoot somebody and just go on with his day. You don't have to have him shoot somebody and then go, hey, did you see what I just did? Remember when I did that a year ago? Remember? That's kind of what frustrates me about this. And every time it comes to a head, there will be like a conversation that really doesn't belong. And the big climax at the end is pretty much entirely conversation. And I was thinking about that scene from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where Tuco is in the bathtub. And this guy who he shot in the beginning of the movie, the very beginning of the movie, finally catches up with him and comes in and he's explaining to him how he's been chasing him all this time. And it's like the James Bond villain explaining everything to Tuco, right? And Tuco just shoots him. He just has his pistol under the soap suds, and he just shoots him and says, when you have to shoot, don't talk. And I feel like Elmore Leonard could have learned from that, because when you have to shoot, don't talk. And that is very applicable to these books. I don't need a whole conversation. Just get to it. Get to the action, please. And I know I'm being harsh on Elmore Leonard, but that just frustrates me so much in books in general, not just in Westerns. Like, there's a scene in this where one of the guards shoots one of the prisoners who has been kind of bragging about what he's going to do when he gets out, how he's going to expose this whole fraud. And the guard shoots him in front of all these prisoners, right? There doesn't need to be any follow-up to that. That's it. That's your action right there. Everybody saw what happened. Everybody heard that guy bragging, saw this guard shoot him. There's no explanation needed to them or to us. But the guard looks at everybody and goes, "You guys saw that he was running for it. Everybody here saw it. You all better swear to it that he was running for the hills and I had to shoot him down." It's like, just can it, buddy. They know why you shot him. They know what's going on. That's, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that will make sense to anybody, but that just frustrates me about certain books. And when I look back over the westerns of Elmore Leonard, which I have read, I see that again and again, right? The big bad guy who doesn't really have a foundation for being a big bad guy. We're just told repeatedly that he's a bad guy. And then, like I said, that nudge, that, "Hey, did you see that? I really am a bad guy," you know? Like, there's a back and forth between the drunk gambler's wife and the main bad guy. I think his name is Frank something. And he's going on and on telling her, like, "You'll never escape from here. You'll never get out of here. You'll never get out of here alive. Did I mention that there's no escape from here? That I'm a bad guy and there's no escape from here?" That's basically, it's not exact. I mean, I'm sort of just distilling it into its essence here, but that is basically repeated over and over and over and over again. But the story itself was really entertaining, and really, there were some thrilling moments in this, and there was much more good in this novel, much more good writing in this novel than bad writing, and the story was really good, and I just enjoyed it, even though those moments really did kind of bug me. And I think some people have been a little bit irritated about how I have been sort of digging in to these novels and sort of picking them apart, and how willing I am to talk about the negative aspects of these books. But if I got on here and I glossed over all of that, I would not be, first of all, I wouldn't be being honest with you. I wouldn't be honest with the viewers of this video, and I wouldn't be honest with myself, because it was not all good. I mean, there were parts that were not very good. And so I feel like it's sort of my responsibility to be honest with the viewers of these videos, right? I would feel bad about it. So the second book I finished was Matt Brown's Hangman's Creek. This is apparently the very first Luke Starbuck novel. And I really enjoyed this. Like, it had some moments that weren't particularly well written or anything, but I enjoyed this from start to finish. And I didn't think that I was going to, honestly, because I thought it was about cattle rustling, but it's actually not. It's about horse rustling. So horse thieves in the Old West in Texas. The plot of this novel is that a bunch of horse ranchers, well, they're cattle ranchers and horse ranchers in Texas, have started to experience horse theft. And so they all get together and they're talking about it, and they nominate Luke Starbuck, who is the foreman of one of these ranches, to turn into a detective, basically, and go out and figure out who these people are and to deal with them. They don't want the law involved. They just want these rustlers dead. And so they hire Luke Starbuck to do it. Or, well, they sort of hire him. Mostly he's just volunteered for the job and sent out to do it. And so he's not particularly happy about this, but he rides off anyway. And he spends months and months on the trail, riding around, trying to find out what's going on. And he can't figure out who these people are. But he comes to see that horses are missing from all over. And he finally winds up in Dodge City, Kansas, and he talks to a man there who sells horses, and he gets a lead. And so he rides down to the camp of these people that have been selling these horses to this guy, and it turns out that they are in New Mexico. And so Luke Starbuck rides into this camp of horse thieves and pretends to be an out-of-work ranch hand, and he gets into a fight with the big bully guy there, and they hire him on, and he starts to ride with these guys and go out and steal horses in the middle of the night. And he has to stay with them for about a month. And eventually they ride down with all these stolen horses to a big, like, I think Matt Brown calls it like a trade convention of horse thieves. And what they have going on is that they are taking all these horses from these different states, and they are branding them. They're branding over the original brands and making them look completely different so that nobody can tell where these horses came from. And then they trade them with each other, and they go back to where they're from and sell them in these other places, right? And so nobody can find these horse thieves. And it's a really clever idea, actually. And in the morning, in rides the big guy who's over it all. And we don't really understand why it is that the big guy is over all this, other than that he is this really dangerous outlaw. But why these guys don't just kind of shoot him and take all the profits themselves is not really well explained. But Luke Starbuck decides to stir up some trouble. And it was actually really good. I really enjoyed this. I want to say that the reason I enjoyed this so much is because Matt Braun went there. He went there in a way that Louis L'Amour never would. And I think I figured out why I don't really care for a lot of Louis L'Amour's writing is because he is very polite. Louis was not really willing to go there, right? And I've always said this, but Louis L'Amour reminds me very much of Ray Bradbury. They have very much the same sort of polite attitude to their writing and this optimism and everything. And it's always sort of rubbed me the wrong way because life isn't always polite. Life isn't always friendly or anything like that. Sometimes it is gritty, it is dirty, it is rough and callous and filthy. And now this is not filth, right? This is not completely, there's like a dirty sex scene, but it's not like long arm status, right? It's not like that. But it doesn't flinch away from that reality of what people get up to. And so there's like bad language, there's coarse language, there is blood and all sorts of things like that. I really liked that because I would prefer to see the Old West through a lens of how it probably actually was. And I know that people weren't always as polite with each other as they were in Louis L'Amour novels. You know, Louis L'Amour has a quality of making like even bordellos seem like comfortable places where nothing dirty or foul ever happens, right? That was not so in this book. And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed reading something that was more realistic, more open to that sort of thing. And so if this is going to be a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear this spoiler for Hangman's Creek, please just skip ahead a little ways. But I feel like this is important to why I enjoyed this book, so I want to talk about it for a minute. Now, of course, Luke Starbuck, since this is the first of a series, he comes through and he comes through successful. And they ambush these horse thieves at this horse thief convention, and they hang them. And one of the guys, they sort of torture him, and they tell him, we'll let you go if you tell us where this main bad guy lives. And it turns out he doesn't know anything. And he tells them as much as he knows, and they hang him anyway. And that made me kind of sick. Like that really bothered me. And the more that I thought about it, the more that it bothered me. Like, what is going on here is that these horse thieves were stealing these horses from rich men, very wealthy men, and now they have been killed for stealing from these very wealthy men. When really, they're not stealing from poor people. They're not putting anyone out of house or home. They're not killing anybody. They're not committing any sort of debauchery. They're just stealing horses from rich men. And is that really a crime worth killing these people for? Right? Like, you could just take them to a prison and have them build a road, like in Escape from Five Shadows or something, right? But these men they are so angry that they have had these horses stolen from them. And I understand there's a big commitment in raising horses and all that, but is it worth killing these men for? Is it worth torturing somebody and then killing him, going back on your word that you would let him go? And that just really bothered me. And I was thinking, is that going to be how it is? Because that reminded me of like an Edge novel. And one of the reasons I won't read Edge anymore is because the violence in those Edge books by George Gilman, they are just violent, and there is no there's no real reason for the violence a lot of times. It is just violent to be violent, and it's kind of sickening after a while. I don't know if that's how it is in the later books, but in the first few, it's very much like that, where Edge is just, he will just kill anybody. Just anybody. For any real reason. If somebody just says something to Edge, he will just kill them. And that just bothered me, and I was like, oh, I was really enjoying this. And what I liked about this is that later on, a few 20, 30 pages later, Luke Starbuck is sitting down in a restaurant, well, not a restaurant, but like a saloon, and he is thinking about that to himself. He's thinking about, is that really what I just did? Did I really just lead a bunch of rich men to find these men who were stealing from them and then hang them and take it back, to dishonor our word that we gave this man? Is that really what I'm all about? Am I okay with that? And he was not okay with that, actually. But he does sort of rationalize it to the point where he thinks, okay, it's awful and it's terrible and I don't like it, but out here we're all on our own. And if people are stealing from us, they're just going to continue to steal from us and steal from us and steal from us, and it's going to start with stealing and it might end up even worse. So that's just, it's the law of the jungle, basically. And now I understood what he was talking about, but just to have that moment of reflection really redeemed this character for me and really redeemed this novel for me. I felt like that was very, very important. And I was really happy to see that, because you will not see that in very many of these novels. At least not the ones that I have read. And there are tens of thousands of Westerns, maybe hundreds of thousands of Westerns. So I can't by any means say that I've read all of them or even a lot of them. But that just struck me as being very nice for this novel. And so the next book is Louis L'Amour's Buckskin Run. This is a collection of short stories, and I enjoyed this. There were stories that I liked much better than other stories. Some of them I didn't really care for at all. There were a lot of coincidences in this. There were a lot of blunt endings. There was a lot of, well, I'm the big man around here speeches, and things like that. Sort of the things that I like least about Louis L'Amour's writing. But there were other stories that I really liked, and some I only liked part of. Some I liked all of. The ones that I really liked, I believe the one that I liked was Buckskin Run, which was sort of a mystery story where a man comes into town and he has to solve his brother's murder, and he knows that it has to have been one of these ranchers, one of these outlaws, and there's a whole story about stolen gold, and he has to put all these things together and figure it out. I really liked that, although I did feel it was really rushed, and I felt like most of these stories were pretty rushed, actually. I think that was their one main flaw, was how rushed these stories felt. There was another called, and I'm not exactly sure how you would pronounce this, but it's called Down the Pagonip Trail? Pagonip? I have no idea how you would pronounce that word there. And I liked all that story, except for the very end, which ends on coincidences that don't really make sense in the context of the story, to be honest, except to move the story along. But it's about a man. He's completely busted flat. He has no money. He's moved out into the middle of this mountain range, and he's trying to make a go as a cattle rancher, and all his cows have died, basically. He has no money. He has barely any food. He's had to pawn off his pistol and all sorts of things just to eat. And a man shows up who is an outlaw, a wanted outlaw shows up, and basically takes half his food, and they get to talking back and forth, and he stays there for a few days, and then he takes off. And the man whose cabin this is, the main character, he knows that there's a blizzard coming, basically. It comes every year because he lives in this high country, and he figures that this outlaw can only be staying in this cave up in these mountains. And so a blizzard comes in, and it's freezing cold, just completely below zero, and he knows that this outlaw is out there, and everything, there's this sort of fog that turns to ice in this area, and so everything is covered in ice, And he starts thinking about it, and he thinks that guy is out there by himself, and he has very little food. He has no real shelter except this cave, and he can't leave him out there, which is kind of absurd if you think about it. But he goes on this trek up this mountain, and he finds this guy. He's broken his leg. He's almost dead, and he saves his life. And I thought that was really good. I didn't care for the ending of that story. I thought that it was I felt that it was too fitting for Louis L'Amour's, like there's a romance subplot going on, and it just fit into that too well. But the story itself was really good about how they go up this mountain, how he comes back down with this man, describing the geography and the terrain and everything, and this freezing fog. It was really good, actually, the snowstorm itself. And I really liked the last story. I think the last story of all in this book was my favorite. It's called What Gold Does to a Man. It's about this group of prospectors who are out in the middle of nowhere, and one of them winds up murdered. And the main character is almost certain that it has to be one of them, that there's nobody else around. And so they are working, and the suspicion starts to grow. And I really liked that. Although, to be fair, I really didn't care for the ending of that story either. It was kind of a soft landing for a story that needed a hard ending. But it was okay. Not my favorite of Louis L'Amour's short story collections, but it was enjoyable. And so next, I think I'm going to read Louis L'Amour and the Empty Land. This is kind of like Roadhouse, right? This is about a guy who shows up in a town full of outlaws and has to clean it out. And that's sort of what he does for a living, is clean out these old West towns. And so I'm really interested. I had never really thought about it as Roadhouse until I just said that. So now I'm kind of really looking forward to this and seeing what happens, like, and comparing it in my head to like Roadhouse. I don't know if it'll be anything like that, but it just made me think of that. And I know I've said that Louis L'Amour gets on my nerves. I think he was a good writer. I just think that he had some traits that really bugged me. The coincidences, the blunt endings, the sort of softness of his villains in most cases, the politeness, the overwhelming politeness of Louis L'Amour. I mean, he looks like he was a polite guy, doesn't he? I remember seeing guys like that when I was young, right? I used to go to, in particular, I used to go to this flea market. It took place on Wednesdays at a place called County Line. And there was like a catfish house there, and there was also a sale barn for like livestock, which I went with my grandpa. And we weren't interested at all in the livestock. Like, we never went and paid attention to that. But we would walk around this flea market, and there'd be like people selling ducks and geese, not geese, but ducks and like chickens and stuff like that. I don't know, they might have been selling geese sometimes, who knows. And honey and vegetables and all kinds of stuff, junk from their garages. But there would always be like guys walking around who looked just like Louis L'Amour. And I've seen Louis L'Amour's face so many times since I was a kid that I almost feel like he's some kind of long lost relative or something. But anyway, that's probably what I will be reading next. And maybe Canyon of the Gun by T.V. Olson. I may be slowing down on Westerns for a little while as I try to focus on, I'm not sure if you saw one of my previous videos, but it was about how I've taken on too many books all at once, and so I'm trying to pare those down before I move on to another Western. And I've done that. I finished Buckskin Run, and I'm in the process of finishing the Encyclopedia of Urban Legends. But anyway, so that is my video today, and those are the books that I have finished. Buckskin Run, I'm all out of order here. Buckskin Run by Louis L'Amour, Hangman's Creek by Matt Braun, which I give this a, I don't know, 2 thumbs up, I guess, and Escape from Five Shadows, which I will give 1 thumb up. I've been watching a lot of Siskel and Ebert lately, and so I want to thank you for joining me today. If you have any thoughts about these books, if you've read them before, love to hear about it, and I will see you next time.